Hello, everyone, and welcome to Unfound Live for December 8th, 2025. I hope everybody is doing well out there. As you can see, I'm still here in the state of Pennsylvania, but I am headed back to Florida tomorrow. Can you believe I've been here almost 3 weeks. I don't know where the time goes. I don't know. I say that so many times on the live show and elsewhere, and I just don't know. But yeah, this is been 3 weeks, and so it is now time for me to go back to Florida, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that here in a moment. I have a fantastic show planned for all of you tonight, although this may be one of the rare times where I come to this camera and I'm not sure if I have enough material for tonight's show, simply because of I've been getting ready to go back to Florida, putting things together. And then my brother Michael was here today, and that was a factor in preparing. But certainly I have a lot to talk about, but I'm not sure if, like I said, if I have 2 hours of material or not. So there's that. Hello, Lisa, just about to take off. So hello and goodbye. Catch you on the rewatch. All right. Well, yeah, Lisa, you told me no Wi-Fi on the plane or something. That would be cool if somebody were watching the live show on a plane flying somewhere. That might be interesting. So, okay, that's fine. And hello, Charlie. I see you're in here tonight. I don't know if maybe we're having some people having a problem getting on kind of light with the viewers so far tonight, but that happens sometime. The show gets done one way or another. But as I said, still, I think that I have a pretty good show planned for all of you tonight. Of course, I always promise to cover the items that are listed in the title for these live shows. And as you can see there in the title, first of all, we have Cindy Anderson. Now, what's going to be a little different about this is that I've actually been working on her disappearance, as I've stated, for a while. And I'm just going to look at her disappearance. You know, the fact is, I know many other things that have not been made public. All right, but I'm not really, I'm not ready to go public with those things yet, since I have been working on it for a while. So I am going to just look at it like I've looked at all of these other disappearances that I've kind of picked out here and there. And like Amy Bechtel from some weeks ago and some others. And I'm just going to look at Cynthia Anderson's disappearance that way, even though like I said, I've accumulated some new information over the months of working on her disappearance. And I'm hoping one of these days it'll be an episode, but this is something that's more of a long-term project for me, and I've actually recently brought in assistant Eric to help with it as well. So we'll just have to see. But tonight we're going to take a look at, or I'm going to take a look at Cynthia Anderson's disappearance. This is a disappearance that happened back in 1981 in Toledo, Ohio, and I'll certainly get into how I came across her disappearance and some of the motivations for me taking it on as a project behind the scenes. Also, the database I can officially say is done. I was hesitant to say that, even though I've been working with it, although I haven't been able to do much of that because I've been up here seeing my dad. But it's worked. It just wasn't totally working. Well, now it's totally working, and I want to talk more about that tonight. And then also, I got an email from another true crime person who I respect a lot, and it reminded me that a couple months ago when CrimeCon was going on, I never did talk about that because I know some of you have been around long enough to know, to have heard me talk about CrimeCon and my attitude toward it. But being that I got this email from a person I respect in the true crime community, and he's asking me if I would be interested in things, this may be the time to maybe go back, being that I didn't do it back when CrimeCon or whatever was happening. I can talk about my attitude toward it now. So I'll be doing that, and that's what it means by true crime events. That's what it means by that in the title tonight. Like I said, not a lot of people. If there are, I see the numbers are there, but if you are watching, do not be afraid to make yourself known in the chat tonight. So maybe some people getting in late. I don't know what's going on out there. Maybe we have some YouTube issues. I do realize that the internet that I have up here at my dad's is not as fast as what I have in Florida, so maybe there's some complications there. So if you're getting in late, maybe I can understand that. But hello, Charlie. Hello, D. How are you? Hello, Amy. Hello, Cranky. Greetings to all that. I am on time tonight. Thank you, Cranky. Hello, Jacqueline. What's going on with you? Good to see you as well. And I see we got some thumbs up coming from Facebook. I always love to see that. And maybe this is the best time to remind all of you, as you are watching tonight, please give this show a thumbs up and, share it, like it. I would appreciate it. It helps us with the algorithms. We're trying to get as far as subscribers to the YouTube channel. We only have about 1,000 more to go, and we'll be to 20,000, which I think would be a pretty good goal. I can remember, of course, when there weren't, hardly any viewers or subscribers, and now we're here almost at 20,000. I do realize that there are YouTube channels out there with hundreds of thousands of subscribers and everything. I really don't know what to think about that, to be honest. I am a cynic when it comes to a lot of those things. So I don't get, so I don't get too caught up in those numbers. I'm just looking at what the subscribers are for Unfound's channel, and always remembering that this is primarily a podcast, not a video. Unfound is not a video production. It's really an audio production, so I always try to remember that as well. D saying, I did not get any of your going live until it popped up by Facebook. I'm not sure why that is. Just like restaurants, you get a slow night. Yeah, because it surely is playing here on YouTube. So I'm not sure what to think about that. Sorry about that, D. I don't know. So what has gone on with me since we all got together last week? Well, quite a bit. Went and saw a basketball game up at Slippery Rock University on Thursday evening with my dad. My dad had wanted to go. He had not gone to one yet this season. So a basketball game, not a football game, but a basketball game. And so we went up on Thursday evening, and it was convenient in that I was able to get back and still do a live show with D at 9 p.m. Eastern that night, and we just did it wasn't even true crime, it was just trivia, which I thought was an interesting choice, Dee. But I did get back home to do that show with Dee, and so the basketball game started at 6. It didn't even go for like 12 hours or something, but it was good to go up there. That was a very cold night as well. That was one of the coldest days that has happened since I've been here. I think it got down to like 9 or 10 degrees, and it was like 10 degrees when my dad and I were coming out of the basketball game. Luckily, the walk to the car wasn't that far. So did that. Like I said, my brother Michael was up here today. He came up here about 2 o'clock, and we got pizza, so it was nice. We just sat around with my dad and talked for a while. My dad did have a great birthday. Remember last Monday, my dad's birthday was last Monday. You might remember that I went up there and they had a little party for him with cake and everything. That happened right before last week's live show. But overall, I thought, he had a pretty decent birthday. I know that he enjoyed it, certainly because I was here. And, my dad and I really just did some driving around a couple nights this past week. What was it? Was it Saturday night? I think it was Saturday night, but another night last week, maybe it was Tuesday and Friday, or Tuesday and Saturday. My dad and I just went out in the car and we just went to look at Christmas lights. We left at like, I don't know, 8 o'clock. I don't even know, or something. We got in his car and we just picked a direction. And we went on some back roads and back in some neighborhoods and just looked at Christmas lights. We must have drove around for like an hour and a half. Just driving around. Hey, let's see what's down this street. Hey, let's see what's going on down this street for like an hour and a half. It was really cool. And it's also been kind of nice because it's actually snowed here and the snow is stuck. It snowed sometime the beginning of last week, and it's been cold enough that the snow has stayed. Usually when you get in, November into early December, usually the snow only sticks around for a couple days and that's it. The snow is stuck around. So, there's still snow out here in the grass. Of course, the roads, there's no problem with the roads. But to be able to go around and drive through these little towns and communities and have snow on the ground and there'll be Christmas lights, it's kind of cool. Of course, we're in our very warm vehicle. We have the heaters turned on for the seats that my dad had us in his car. And in fact, the steering wheel is even heated. I mean, we're just nice and cozy and we're, driving around and looking, we like those. Oh, that house needed to put more effort into it. We like those lights. We're very, very judgmental, I should say, when we're driving around and looking at lights. But I think he enjoys it. Of course, I do the driving, and all he has to do is sit back. And probably the best one we saw, I think I took a video of it. I posted on my private Facebook page. It's like right down the street here, right down Route 68 going toward Butler. Somebody's really gotten into the spirit, and they have like those LED lights and everything set up in their yard, and it's synchronized to music. And, if you turn into a certain FM number, station in your car, the music will be playing. It'll be going along with the lights. Somebody just, I don't know, maybe 2 miles down Route 68 on the main road here going toward Butler. It's right down there, right on the main road. And so I pulled over to the side of the road and took some video of that, which was pretty cool. But we saw some, really nice, more traditional types of displays as well. Just static lights, regular lights. But you do notice that LED lights are getting more and more popular, but still most people have, I think, the more fashion old-fashioned, incandescent bulbs or whatever you want to call it. So we really enjoyed doing that. We go out to breakfast. I've certainly put on a couple pounds since I've moved, since I drove up here. And so hopefully I'll be losing some of those pounds once I go back to Florida. So these are some of the things that my dad and I have been doing. What else is going on is, interestingly, in driving up here, I don't think I've talked about this, but my car has 125,000 miles on it, and I've noticed that has started to use oil a little bit more than it had. And I got up here and it probably used like a quart of oil driving from Florida up here. I checked it when I got here and it was down a quart. And remember, I just got my oil changed right before I came up here, and I'm pretty sure it was probably right at the right point. It burned about a quart. It's not good. Well, what I discovered is that there was a class action lawsuit and also a service bulletin regarding the engine that is in my car. It's an 2016 Hyundai Sonata, and it's called their Theta 2 engine, and there have been enough problems with them with oil usage, and I didn't realize this until I started looking into this just in the last few days, because of course I'm driving back to Florida, and I'm probably going to I just want to get, the car ran fine, but there has to be oil in it. And I've discovered that because of the service bulletin and the problems people have had, they have actually extended the warranties on those cars. And it very well may be that I can get a brand new replacement engine put in my car. So there's a process, of course, you have to go through. And I'll have to wait to do that until I get back to Florida. But they have to kind of chart some things and everything. But you can start, if you do a Google search or do whatever, you can find people who have had this problem, and Hyundai has replaced their engines, even though the engines have 100-some thousand miles on them. So I'm certainly going to look into that when I get back to Florida, because otherwise, it's one of those things, if you're just tooling around town and you have to put a little oil in it, it's not like it's blowing oil or anything, but the engine, you really have to be a car geek to understand this stuff. It just burns oil. It's just the engine starts to burn oil more than it should. And of course, it's like some design flaw that they find, it's reared its ugly head. And so I'll keep you posted on that. So I'm thinking, well, it's either going to be one of two things. Either, I'm going to keep my car and get a brand new engine put in it. And of course, if I get a brand new spanking engine in it, I will absolutely run the wheels off that car. Of course, that would probably be the best time to sell it too. I might think about that, or, just have to get another one in jungle. We'll just have to see what happens. So that's what's going on in my car life. So I've topped it off here. I put oil in it. And what I'll probably do is, being that I only ever have to stop once to drive back to Florida, either way, probably when I stop to get gas, I'll probably put some more oil in it. Maybe let's just say, a quarter of a quarter, half a quarter, something like that. Once again, just to get me back to Florida. I think I'll be fine. I'm not worried about it blowing up or anything. As long as you keep oil in it, it'll be fine. It just uses excessive oil. So I think I'll be fine. It ran great. It got like 38 miles to the gallon. So it's burning oil, but it's still getting like 38 miles to the gallon. I don't know. So there's that. So I got a car issue going on, and maybe maybe the universe is trying to tell me that I need to just get another car, and I'll throw that idea around. We'll just have to see. The problem you have when you have a car like that, and then you want to buy another one, either the way I am is, if I'm going to sell the car, I have to be honest with the person. I'm not going to, I don't do that. I don't like that kind of stuff on my mind. So you tell somebody, well, it uses oil, how much you're going to get out of a car like that. So this is all the calculations that I'm making in my head right now. But I don't think I'll have any problems getting back to Florida at all. I don't think about that at all. The other thing that's going on is that I've gotten some help from my dad. He just turned 89, and he has slowed down a little bit. And so I'm gonna be having somebody. It's through an insurance policy that he's had for a long time. That there's gonna be somebody just showing up 3 days a week for a few hours. Kind of do some things for him. And if there's any food shopping and things like that that need to be done, because he really, he can drive. He's a fine driver, still has his mind. Hearing is not so great. He has to wear his hearing aids. His eyes are great, but he's 89 years old, and I don't want him, going shopping in a grocery store. He just shouldn't be doing those things. No way. So he's going to be having somebody come in, like I said, about three times a week, 4 hours a day, and he's just going to put her to work. He's going to have a little assistant to help him with whatever needs done. Of course, if he wants to take her out to breakfast or whatever, he can do that, and she can go do shopping for him if things need cleaned up around here, and anything that he wants done. It'll also be helpful, I think, because sometimes he runs into some computer issues and he calls me and I have to walk him through things, and that can get very difficult. If he has somebody that's, I think this woman's in her 40s, somebody younger, more computer savvy, if she's there, then she can just get on the phone and sort some of these things out. So I'm feeling really good about that. I just hope my dad seems very positive about it. I just hope that continues. We'll just have to see. So that's really what's been going on. Like I said, I can't believe it's been almost 3 weeks that I've been here. I can't believe that it was almost 3 weeks ago that I was coming up from Florida and had the detour where it took me through downtown Pittsburgh, and I got to do that video coming out of the Fort Pitt tunnels. It's crazy. I don't know where the time goes. My dad says the same thing. Let me see here. D says, I was asked to work with a guy who has a big channel for news, Y2 News channel, for helping with a true crime spot. Hey, I was like, my birthday is this month, and I was like, I need a break from the true crime. I see. I know where you're going with this, D. Charlie, the boys and I go to see lights a lot of times this year. Some neighbors. I see that side is the USA is colder than normal. We're, of course, in the middle from New Mexico over there, the hotter than normal. Is it, D? Me and the boys go out to see lights. Some neighbors really get into it around here, I bet. Yeah, that seems like a lot. It is a lot of oil usage. You're right, Charlie. So, and yes, Charlie, I did see Uncle Michael today, and I'm wondering. I guess you saw how Uncle Brian set up he and Laureen's place down there in Florida with the Christmas lights. Brian certainly put some work into that, more than I would have ever suspected. But being that they live on that corner, that very busy corner where they live now, I think he felt pressured to really do it up. So there you go. So that's what's been going on. I've been good. I've been getting my singing practice done while I've been here. Going up to the clubhouse at like 10 at night. So everything's pretty much been the same, except I'm in Pennsylvania and around my dad. Haven't seen it yet. Yeah, he texted everybody. I think that Charlie. Maybe you want to get in that. See, maybe you need to text him so he can send you a picture. All right, let's get to tonight's agenda. As I stated very early on, I posted in there. If you have any questions, like I said, I just got the feeling that I was a little light on material tonight for a variety of reasons. But if you would like to ask me any questions, whether true crime related or not, as long as it's PG and not too personal, I will happily answer it. I enjoy getting questions that kind of come out of nowhere that maybe make me think on my feet a little bit. I enjoy those, and if you have anything on your mind like that, the time would be now to put it in the chat. I also want to remind you there are a variety of ways that you can support what we do here at Unfound. Of course, right there on the screen, patreon.com/Unfound podcast, paypal.me/Unfound podcast. Also, if you want to hit the super chat button while you are in the chat tonight, we know people like to do that once in a while. I would appreciate it. That's an easy way to support Unfound. And also another way is by hitting the join button if you are watching on YouTube. Cranky says your mic sounds much better tonight. Thank you for noticing, Cranky. I think that the reason is I turned down the input volume. As you can tell, I'm not using a microphone like I usually do. There's just not a lot of room right in this area. In fact, if you don't know, I'm sitting on the bed that I sleep on when I'm here. And if I really want to reveal things, I'm actually have a little electric blanket over my legs while I'm doing the show tonight. But it's just on the lowest setting. But I think I just needed to turn the input volume down a little bit for the built-in microphone on this laptop, Cranky. But thank you for noticing. So let's talk about Cynthia Anderson. And I will state once again that I'm not going to get into any information that I've gathered personally over the past 6 months. I'm certainly not ready to do that. And I would never do any of that without permission from Cindy's family, who I've actually been in contact with them for about 6 months, particularly her brother and sister. And primarily her sister, but her brother as well. But so a lot of that stuff is off the record. It's in my files for later publication or revealing, but I wouldn't count on that happening anytime soon. So all I'm going to do tonight is tell you about the disappearance, because certainly I want you to know about it. And it is one that caught my attention, and I'll get into how that happened here in a moment. And it should be, I think, more well known than it is. And I think this is a disappearance that really can challenge our skills at analyzing disappearances. And I think this is a very good example of how what the popular idea was for some years, it just hasn't proven to be true yet. And so you have to start looking, I think, after 44 years at other possibilities. Maybe. Cynthia Anderson, let me read some, but not all, of the Charlie Project page on her disappearance. You should also know this is a disappearance that got Unsolved Mysteries coverage in 1988, 7 years after Cindy went missing. They did the recreation and everything for her disappearance when they did that production in 1988. And in fact, they even used the actual 2 lawyers who she was working for at the time. And they also even used a client of the lawyers who had seen something go on at the office the day before she went missing. So Unsolved Mysteries went all out on that back at the time. And in fact, Cindy's sister, who I'm now talking to, you could see her in that episode, in addition to Cindy's father is in the episode. Unfortunately, Cindy's parents are now deceased. Cindy was employed as a legal secretary for the law offices of James Rabbit and Jay Feldstein on East Manhattan Boulevard in Toledo, Ohio in 1981. She was last seen at the firm on August 4th of that year. So August 4th of 1981 is when she went missing. Her employers discovered that the radio was turned on and their desks were prepared for the day upon their arrival at work. Unclaimed mail had been placed inside the front door handle, and a romance novel Anderson was reading was opened on her desk. There were no signs of her elsewhere in the building, and if I can expound on that a little bit. So, and once again, I'm not revealing anything that I have found out over the last 6 months, but I do know what has been out there for years and what I've discovered. I know where the line is, so don't worry about that. But to maybe put this more in context, Cindy had been working at this law firm for a little while. You know, she wasn't a lifer. She hadn't been working there for years. And in fact, it was just going to be a few more weeks, and she was going to be leaving working at this law firm, and she was going to be going to college. But the usual pattern was that her being this law firm was kind of in a strip mall, and I think there was like some exercise studio on one side and there was a Radio Shack on the other, just to give you an idea. And the usual pattern for a day of work was she would go in, open up the office, she would man the phones, she would be the only one there, and the lawyers usually would be doing their law work in the morning, and then they would come in like at noon or in the afternoon to meet clients who are coming in for consultations or whatever else. So almost all the time, she would be in this law office in the morning by herself. All right, so I think it's important to understand the context of this. And so what happened was that this particular day, and I'll get into some discrepancies later, at least one of the lawyers came in for their afternoon scheduling, whatever. The door was locked, but she wasn't there. Her purse was gone, she was gone, but her car was in the parking lot. So I will continue. And like I said, the radio was turned on. The desks were prepared for the day. So it looks like she had been there. She was certainly there. Her car was there. She was certainly there. And she had done the work that was required of her, but when they showed up, she wasn't there. And the other part of this is that when she would leave, whether she was walking somewhere, I don't know, of course, it's a strip mall, maybe she was going to one of the other places there, she would always leave a little sign in the door saying, hey, I'll be back in 10 minutes, I'll be back in 20 minutes or whatever. There was no sign in the door. So the front door was locked, but there wasn't any sign on the door. And you should know there was a back entrance, like all strip malls have, the front door, and then you have the back door where people take out garbage and everything. But that door could not be opened from the outside. The only way to get in was if somebody opened it from inside. There was no handle, there was no lock, nothing like that. You actually had to open the door from the inside. So it's important to remember. So they get there, she's not there. Her purse and car keys were missing, but her vehicle was locked in the parking lot outside of the office. She did not leave a note on the door, which was her usual habit, as I've already stated. Anderson has never been seen again. She left a substantial amount of money behind in her bank account, and her social security number has not been used since her disappearance. Now, this is what I'm going to read here. Once again, this is public information, and this was covered in the Unsolved Mysteries episode way back in 1988. Cindy had received suspicious phone calls at work in the weeks prior to her disappearance, which seemed to disturb her. Her family reported that she had also suffered from recurring nightmares about being attacked by a man. And once again, this is recreated in the episode, the Unsolved Mysteries episode. Anderson's employers installed an emergency buzzer at her desk during the summer of 1981. Because, so remember, she's there by herself. She's getting these phone calls, people calling, hanging up, or whatever. And because of this buzzer was installed on her desk. And once again, it's public information. I've learned more about this that I can't get into. But this buzzer that was installed was actually done by the Radio Shack guy next door. And so the understanding was that this buzzer was there. If somebody shady or somebody came in and something was going on, all she had to do was hit that buzzer. It would ring over in the Radio Shack, and the couple employees over there, of course, that was when big Radio Shack was big. One of them would know, hey, something's going on, and they might be able to come over or see, to see what's going on. So this buzzer was installed just not long before she went missing. In addition, she also kept the office doors locked while she was there. So if anybody did even come to the office while she was there, they couldn't just walk in. She would see the person, and she would then have to go over there, unlock the door or whatever it was. Somebody couldn't just come in. She would have to let the person in. This was also due to the harassing calls and anonymous messages or ominous messages. There have been several suspects in Anderson's disappearance, none of which have been officially ruled out in her case by investigators. Anthony and Anthony Cook, two brothers convicted of 9 murders in the Ohio area in the 1980s, have denied any involvement in Anderson's case. Another convicted murderer currently in prison in Ohio is thought to have possibly been involved in her disappearance as well, though any connection has never been established and the man has never publicly been identified. Convicted drug dealer Jose Rodriguez and his attorney Richard Neller are also suspects in Anderson's case. Neller worked with Anderson's law firm during 1981, and authorities at the time, back in the early 80s, theorized that she may have overheard conversations between Neller and Rodriguez concerning drug deals prior to her disappearance. Investigators believe the information may have led to Anderson's possible abduction and or murder, though this has never been proven. Okay, once again, this is all public information. I'm just reading from what the Charlie Project. And yes, if you're asking me, do I know more about these stories? I do. An informant testified at Rodriguez's trial in 1995. So 14 years later, what had happened was this lawyer Neller finally got caught doing things with these gangs and drugs and everything, and they went to trial in 1995. So 14 years later, 14 years after Cindy's disappearance. And during that trial, an informant testified that Rodriguez had confessed to killing Anderson, but the testimony was ruled to be unreliable. Both Rodriguez and Neller are currently in prison due to drug connection. In fact, Neller is out, and in fact, Neller is dead. I don't think that needs to be secret. He's dead now. No one has been charged in connection with Anderson's disappearance. Anderson is described as a devout Christian fundamentalist who enjoyed her job and family life in 1981. In fact, she lived at home. She did have a boyfriend who was going to college at the time, and she was going to be joining him at that college. She had a boyfriend and many friends. Anderson was planning to quit her secretarial job in 2 weeks after her disappearance in order to attend Bible college. Her family stated it would be extremely uncharacteristic of her to vanish without explanation for her loved ones. Anderson's parents are both deceased. Her mother died of cancer in 1983, so just a couple years after this. And her father died in 2008. Of course, her mother was already dead by the time the Unsolved Mysteries episode came out. Her father was alive, and he didn't die until the 2000s. In her father's obituary, it was noted that Anderson preceded him in death. Her case remains unsolved. So when her father was, and I Can't remember if I've looked at his obituary or not. But in the obituary, I guess it says that she predeceased him. So even though there's no proof that she's dead, but that's in here, and you might find that interesting as well. So you might look at this and say, maybe it's not a surprise to any of you then, after I've read all of this, that why this disappearance caught my eye. So I'm going to tell you where it caught my eye. It's very weird. As you know, kind of this year, I have ordered some missing persons books and have read them. And one of the books that I got off of Amazon was a book on disappearances, and it was like 2 paragraphs of disappearances per page. And it was, hello, Spooky Pookie, what's going on? How are you? Good to see you tonight. Thanks for making the time. But I started looking at these disappearances in this book, and there were so many in there that I'd never heard of. But there were ones in there that I had heard of, like Mara Murray is in this book, as an example. Well, I started looking up some of these disappearances, and it's very clear to me that a lot of these disappearances in this book are made up. I'm not making this up. But there are many disappearances in this book that are made up. I did newspaper. You do not know how many of these disappearances I tried to find like independent information on, like going to newspapers.com, of course, NamUs, of course, the Charlie Project. Nothing. So I'm thinking that this book was written by AI. Somebody out there did this book pretending to be an author and did this disappearance book, and it was written all by AI. Just AI collecting information and then making up its own disappearances. But the person who created this book did just enough to make the book believable, because the person sprinkled in real disappearances within all these fake ones. Yes, this is real. And in fact, when I get back to Florida, I will show you what the book is. And I've tried to track, the book does have an author's name on it. I've not been able to track this person down anywhere. I think it's a pseudonym. I think it was written by AI. It's all fake. But this book is what led me to Cindy's disappearance, because her disappearance is in this book. And while I'm going through there checking to see, is this disappearance real? Is this disappearance real? Is this disappearance real? Came across hers. Oh, it is real. Wow, a woman went missing from a law office. That's always going to get my attention. Always. Of course, we ever hear a lot about people, women disappearing from convenience stores, maybe some other types of places, but disappearing from a law firm is not very common. Although and I've talked about this story, there was a lawyer who disappeared from a law firm within the past couple years. And in fact, he was murdered. And in fact, he was murdered while other lawyers were there. And somehow the killer was able to sneak this lawyer's dead body out of the law firm without anybody noticing. Maybe it had to do with a malpractice. A doctor did this. It was a malpractice case or something. And this doctor totally lost his mind, went to that law firm, killed this lawyer, and took him out. Maybe that's ringing a bell for some of you. And it happened right there in Pinellas County where I live. So I think that was also on my mind, knowing about that incident, that murder, when I came across Cindy's disappearance. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And so I decided I was going to make this a disappearance that I would work on in the background for a while. And so I managed to track down Cindy's sister this past summer, and she and I have been in contact. But like I said, I'm not getting into anything that she and I have discussed. I'm not going to get into anything that I've discussed with other people who her family has wanted me to talk to. And it's been a few people. So I have talked to people outside of Cindy's family about this disappearance, but like I said, I'm not getting into anything like that. So I just decided, well, let's see what we can do. And it has really been an eye-opener. I went back and, of course, I've watched the Unsolved Mysteries episode from 1988 many times. And, I've done some other things to kind of get a feel for this. So, as I stated, though, I'm just going to take a look at this disappearance as if these other disappearances that I've talked about over the, I pick one out every week now to do. So I'm just going to look at it this way. So we have this disappearance. We have a young woman, and I should mention something else that was a prominent part of the Unsolved Mysteries coverage, and certainly was a prominent part that, I think at least a lot of people got caught up in this. The other part I need to add, once again, it's public information, is that not long before Cindy went missing, graffiti had been sprayed. There was like construction going on, like a new building in that strip mall that was within sight. If Cindy was sitting at her desk looking out the front window, she would have been seeing this construction going on. And graffiti was done on this construction project, like on the plywood. And it said, "Cindy, I love you," with the initials, I think it was GW or GK, something like that. And at the time, and what happened was it got painted over. And whoever did it put the message up again. And that message was still there as graffiti on the, pretty big at the time of Cindy's disappearance. Now, as you can imagine, a lot of people thought, well, this message surely has something to do with Cindy, who is right there at this law firm. And that was a huge avenue of investigation at the time, to the point that even in 1988, they talked about it in the Unsolved Mysteries episode. The problem, and this is public information, I'm not revealing, I'm talking out of school here, is that we now know that Cindy and that message had nothing to do with Cindy Anderson, who went missing. And in fact, I know who the real Cindy is, and I know who spray painted the building. And once again, it's out there public. You really have to dig a little bit more to find that. So what everybody was caught up on in the early 1980s, and seeming through all of the 80s, being that they talked about on the Unsolved Mysteries episode, we are now very sure here in 2025 that graffiti had nothing to do with Cindy's disappearance at all. Like I said, this is a unique one. So what would be some additional information? What would be helpful to know on top of whatever I have read? Well, what would be helpful to know is, how long have the nightmares and calls been happening? Exactly. Not just a roundabout thing, but very exactly. And what should also be noted is that even though she was living at home, none of these calls ever happened at home. It was very clear in the Unsolved Mysteries episode, and I think, once again, I think I can say that all of these calls only happened when she was at the law firm. But still, would like to know more about how often were these calls? Does anybody have any idea when they started? What was going on? And then with these nightmares, once again, how long had those been going on? And once again, this was a recreation from the Unsolved Mysteries episode, where if you go, you can find it on YouTube, it's free, that you will see a recreation where it's like in a bedroom, and you'll see the woman playing, maybe it was Cindy's mother, I don't know, but the mother, talking to the woman playing Cindy, and the character Cindy talking about having these visions and nightmares, or whatever was going on. Be interesting to know how long that had been going on. It would also be interesting to know and helpful to know, well, how psyched was she about going to college? Was she really, was she excited as, did really people really think she was excited as she seemed to be? Or was she just doing this to satisfy our parents? Because we have to remember, a lot of people, young people, maybe they don't want to go to school for whatever reason, and they feel like they have to because their parents expect that. There's a lot of different, of course, some families expect a young person to go in the military and they don't want to. I'm just not picking on any going to school. We just know sometimes parents have ideas about what they want their kids to do. The kids don't want to do that, but the kids maybe don't want to offend their parents, don't want to tick their parents off, whatever else. So was she really dead set on going to this Bible college? Something interesting. Any complaints about any of the clients? Now, of course, we talked in the description about this client that was some drug runner or something, and did she overhear something? You can choose to believe that or not. Obviously it's something that they've looked to. And at any time, a missing woman's going to be mentioned in a trial. I mean, even though it doesn't, obviously they thought it was unreliable. I mean, that's going to catch anybody's attention. But did she have any complaints about any of the clients, or any of the clients back at that time, that summer of 1981? Have certain negativities toward women or anything like that. That might be helpful to know. What was her usual routine when the lawyers weren't there? Now, this certainly would be hard to figure out, because it seems that she was at this law office all by herself. But, what time did she usually get to work? What did she usually do for lunch? Is there any way that any of that can be broken down? And of course, all these years later, 44 years later, of course, her parents are dead. All but one of these lawyers is dead. And some other people are dead that you'd like to talk to, but they're gone. So it really narrows down who you can talk to. But, you'd want to know, is there anybody in that vicinity who could really nail down what her usual routine was? Did she get there to work and just sat at her desk for the whole time? Or were people coming in? Or was she leaving the office, locking it, and going somewhere in the strip mall and walking back? What do we know about that? That might be helpful to know. Because, you have to remember that, at least according to the facts as they are known, there's nothing ruling out the idea that she got up, left the office, locked the door, and simply forgot to put the sign there. But, she went somewhere and, somebody attacked her somewhere. Some just riding along and did that, and it just happened to be the time where the specific incident where she did not say, hey, I'll be back in 10 minutes, because this is something that continues to stick out. As you can imagine, Cindy was known as being very conscientious. I don't think anybody'd be surprised by that. And so you'd think if she was leaving the office, that she would do what would be required in saying, hey, sorry, the door's locked, I'll be back in 10 minutes. If somebody came up, and she wasn't there. That she didn't do that. Did she just forget to do that? Or was there a reason that wasn't done? Either way, the door was locked. My point is that, given the facts, there's no fact ruling out the idea that she went to walk somewhere and got abducted and she simply forgot to put a sign on the door. And what would also be interesting to know, we have to remember that this law firm continued to run. It continued to exist. So what would the person who took her place say about doing that job? Because as we all learn, and families learn it the hard way, The world continues to spin. The earth continues to spin. She goes missing. It's horrible. It sucks. All these lawyers surely, very sad about that. But everybody still has to do their work. And so they surely got someone to take her place. Well, then what does that person say about doing that job? Did that person get any phone calls? Did this buzzer that it was installed here, what did that person think about the buzzer? This would all be very, very helpful information. It'd give us a lot of insight into the work environment. Kind of looking at this through the eyes of Cindy, even though she wasn't there anymore. We could look at it through the eyes of the new person being there daily. What did this person see going on there? What did that person experience? Did people come to the law office when the lawyers were there and this person was only there alone? This would all be helpful information. So just, once again, just keeping this to the way I've done all these other disappearances, these are a lot of the ideas that come to my mind. So let me go back. And so once again, Spooky Pookie, how are you today or tonight? Good to see you. Thanks for making time for the live show. Rockford, hello, Rockford. How are you doing? General question, do you think her imminent departure played a role? Not the first case where someone was leaving a job and was victimized before leaving. It could be. There's, once again, I just have to be a little more, I have to be vague on this, even though, there are some things. I would say, even knowing what I know off the record, Rockford, it's a possibility that there could be, I guess the way I would put it is, there could be causation and correlation between her leaving for school in a couple weeks and her going missing. Yes. There's nothing, it's still on the table. There's no factual things that, anything to support it one way or the other, but it's something that I continue to look at. And I know that Eric, now that he's assisting me a bit, he'll be looking at that as well. Rockford continues, there's also the woman in Cleveland who was murdered outside the law office she was visiting by her lawyer. Her last name was Sherman. I think I knew about that, Rockford, although I've not looked at that recently because I did do some looking at trying to understand crimes that take place at law firms. And once again, I think I can say this without revealing too much, is almost exclusively when you have issues that happen at law firms, it has stuff to do with the law firms or even the people at the law firms. And what I mean, that would be in contrast to woman is sitting at her desk at a law office, some random stranger comes in and abducts her. That happens at convenience stores. That happens at other kinds of businesses. But at law firms, that is extremely, extremely, extremely rare. And I don't even know if that's ever happened. That doesn't mean it couldn't have happened with Cindy Anderson. But I would say overwhelmingly the stats say when weird things happen at law firms, it has to do with things that are going on in the law firm, and it's not random. So there's that. Remember that episode, Unsolved Mysteries? Okay. Yeah, you're okay. Very good. So those are some things that would be helpful to know. So allow me now to do some analysis on this. And once again, just because I continue to work on this and I'm not ready to say when just because I continue to work on this and I'm not sure when this will be an episode. And in fact, depending on how the work goes, maybe it'll never be an episode. If we really get into some things, really discover some things, then this would be a situation where I would have to go to the police first. Just saying. So Rockford, I'd look at the tax lawyers first. According to Paul Holmes, they work the least. Yes, okay. So here is some of my analysis. I'm just looking at this cold, not having done anything on this the last 6 months. I think what we have is a scene which I would call is a scene in conflict. On one hand, we have a young woman who, by all accounts, was very conscientious. She was an employee in good standing at the law firm. I believe that she would have continued to work at the law firm. I think that the lawyers there thought her work was fine. And if she wasn't going to college, she would have continued to work there. So I think she was well thought of. The problem is that if she left by herself and got abducted somewhere out in the parking lot and nobody saw it, then why did she not put the sign up when she left? Like I said, we have a very conscientious young woman, but on the other hand, she was supposed to do that and didn't. So it does seem that there's a little bit of a conflict between the missing person, what we know about the missing person, and the scene itself. I think it's important. I think we also, my analysis would also be that, and if you're wondering what kind of law they did do some criminal law. They did divorce law. And so we have to remember that law firms can bring in some rough characters. They may be out in bail. They may be on the run from the law, and they're going in to see their lawyer, maybe to turn themselves in or something. So this is also something that we have to keep in mind. Did one of these people come into the office, whether days before, and discover that she was there alone, in the morning, usually in the mornings? Or did somebody just happen to show up there just that day? And she let this person in, and this person who was rough around the edges discovers she's there alone, and something happens. So that is also something I think that's a very big part of this analysis. That law firms can have people who may be prone to violence or whatever in there. And of course, being that it's a divorce, they do divorces. We know how contentious those can get. And in fact, in my former hometown of Las Vegas, there was a very well-known murder at a law firm within the last maybe 5 years, in which, a couple that's getting divorced, they were getting together for mediation, and the guy just lost his mind and started shooting people in the law office. And then there's even more famous case, Rockford knows about this because we've talked about it before, in San Francisco, where somebody went in and shot up a law office for kind of the same reasons. So we have a law firm that does divorces. You have to keep that in mind. I've already stated when incidents happen at law firms, it usually has something to do with the law firm, even if it means something like some sort of relationship that's gone bad and one lawyer shoots the other. It still has to do with the law firm. This is not somebody randomly showing up. And I say this, even though I've been working with this 6 months, but I have to be true to my own, professionalism here. We have to be open to the idea that Cindy walked off due to whatever was happening. We can't ignore the fact that she claimed that she was having these nightmares. We can't ignore that she was getting these phone calls. But now in the Unsolved Mysteries episode, they do interview a client who was there, who says he was there when a couple of these phone calls occurred. The problem is we only have seemingly only one witness to this. Who else witnessed these calls? And remember, none of these calls ever went to her house because she lived at home. Everybody in her family would have known about it. So given all of that, Our experience tells us, you know what? I don't know what kind of work can necessarily be done in this direction, and just in general. But are we sure that Cindy wasn't having some sort of mental health issue, was something going on there, and she just up and walked off? Very much like maybe like Ian Rogers did, although I'm inclined to believe with Ian Rogers, a disappearance that was featured, 2 months ago or whatever. Of course, that was certainly drug induced. I don't think anybody would think that that's what happened with Cindy. But anybody can have mental health issues. Something to think about. We also, though, have to think, well, if she ran off, she would take her purse. Because remember, her purse and her car keys were missing. Now, I would just take for granted that the keys were in the purse. So that makes all the sense in the world to me. But if she's having some sort of, once again, she was never diagnosed with any mental health issues, nothing, zero. I think I can say that too. But if she did run off, she would then, some sort of mania episode, fight or flight response to whatever. Would she take her purse with her? If she was or the other choice, she's running out of her life. She's going to go and move to California or something. She'd take her purse. Some of you might say yes, some of you might say no. It's hard to tell. If you're wondering about the boyfriend, certainly. Was he, we'd need to know, was he at school or not? And you should know that her boyfriend is still alive. There are many, many people connected to this disappearance who are deceased, but I can tell you her boyfriend at the time is still alive. Does the boyfriend have a good alibi? Did he ever drive by the law firm because maybe he knew that she was working there alone just to stop in and, say hi or do other things? What do we, my analysis would really, we need to have a firm grasp of that. So once again, left office, but didn't leave the regular message. I would say my analysis that anything having anything to do with drugs is as unlikely can be. I've also stated that the graffiti eventually was determined to have nothing to do with Cindy at all. And in fact, neither that other Cindy nor the person who wrote the graffiti, neither of those two even knew Cindy Anderson at all. So we also then, my analysis would then also be, well, who knew she was there alone? And of course, we get this a lot from, maybe we can look at these many abductions that have happened of women in convenience stores, like Jessica Haringa. This is the one that comes to mind. Of course, her killer was put in jail, but her body's still missing, by the way. It's obviously in all these things that these guys who do this knew these women were working alone. Either they showed up and knew she was alone, or they were there earlier and discovered she was alone, then they left and came back later. These types of guys, of course, make sure that these women are alone at these convenience stores before doing what they did, abducting these women usually and killing them. So we have to kind of think of it in the same way. Is this a situation where somebody knew she was working alone, they're always there in the mornings, whether that could be a client, maybe a delivery guy or somebody like that just saw her by herself all the time. Maybe over time it earned her trust and then something happened. So who knew she was there alone? And of those people, were they adequately questioned back then? The other analytical point that I'd like to make on this is, if somebody had it in for Cindy, why didn't they just kill her right there? If this were some guy who found out she was there alone and he decides he wants to rape her, Would he really go in there and abduct her or convince her to leave or force her to leave and then allow her to take her purse? In addition, would that not just, you know, put everything off? You're getting her outside and it's daylight. It's a beautiful summer day in Toledo, Ohio. I mean, it all starts to get complicated fairly quickly, but that doesn't mean it couldn't have happened. But being that the door was locked, if this guy has been casing the joint, knowing that the loggers don't come into noon, and this, he knows that she's there at 10 a.m. by herself. That's a lot of time to do all the bad things in the world. So what would be the point of taking her? Once again, there very well may be. I'm not telling you to think any theory, and I'm really at this point not really, I haven't etched any theory in stone myself. But we do have to think about these things. So even if somebody knew she was there by herself, wants to rape her, kill her, abduction's part of that. Of course, these guys who did the convenience store abductions and killings did that. So maybe that's the counter argument to it. Of course, the other point is abducted her, but allowed her to lock the front door. So as they're going out and he's taking her away, it's like, wait a minute, lock that door. It seems unlikely. And certainly when it comes to the convenience store comparison, I don't think any of those women were allowed to lock the door as they were being dragged out. So it's, once again, something to consider. Now, regarding the back door, like I said, nobody could get in the back door. There was no way to, there was no, of course, this is 1981, but there was no code, to punch in and the door would open. There was no key or anything. It could only be opened from the inside. I suppose we could see a scenario where somebody comes up and bangs the door. She goes back there, and as soon as she opens up, boom, somebody takes her. But then the question is, well, then how did the purse go missing in all of this? She had her purse with her when she went back to the back door. If she was maybe doing something with it and the door bangs back there, she might carry it back there. It seems like too perfect timing to be, but maybe. So these are things, I think that we need to all consider when looking at this disappearance. So what is everybody saying? Rockford's got some words. Today someone smashed up a cookie my boss had on his desk and had left for just 1 hour while he went to a meeting. Anything can happen in just a few minutes. Yeah, I get that, Spooky. You're certainly right. Say someone smashed a cookie my boss had on his desk and had left for just 1 hour. Well, an hour is a long time. And Spooky, let me know if they ever tracked down the mysterious cookie smasher. So you're right. I agree with you on that. Rockford, my first job was at a firm just down the street from the law firm you mentioned in San Francisco, but it was a few years later. It was also a short walk from where Modafferi worked, right? Right. Spooky says, I guess you're saying she would if the kidnapper told her to. So Spooky said, I guess what you're talking is about the front door. So they're leaving. And as they're leaving, the kidnapper says to her, I want you to lock that front door. I agree with you, Spooky. Of course, I think she's going to do whatever it takes to please this person. Hoping, of course, always looking for that opportunity to get away. But in the meantime, just being, I don't know what they're teaching in defense courses for women these days. Do you just go along with what the abductor wants to do, or do you fight for your life from the very first second? I'm not sure what they're teaching out there. But I guess one choice is just going along, and if the guy says lock the front door, she's going to do that. The question, Spooky, is that really something that would be on a kidnapper's mind at that moment? I'm not saying it couldn't be, but I am thinking somebody along those lines, much more important would be getting out of the area as fast as possible, not being seen, making sure she doesn't yell and all these things. maybe locking the front door falls in there somewhere. It just doesn't seem to me that it would be something that would be very prominent as a thought. Rose, hello, Rose. Once again, everybody, Rose, former guest of Unfound, where she came on to talk about her brother. Rose, good to see you tonight. I hope you're doing well. I do see you posting on Facebook, and I know you've written some comments and some posts I've made on my private page, so I've seen all those. Good to see you, Rose. I hope you're doing well. Rose says taking her purse with her wouldn't make any sense. It wouldn't, but we might envision a scenario where it was somebody that she knew. What if it was somebody she trusted? What if it was somebody who came up to the front door, and said, "Hey, I need, you need to come with me. Grab your purse. I just need to, I need to go get my other car at the garage or something, and it's some luring." But then we're talking about somebody she knew. And then we have to start thinking, well, who are the people who could have convinced her to do that? My guess is that circle of people would have been very small at the time. So it could make sense that she took her purse, but I think it certainly raises the idea that it would have to be somebody she knew. And once again, unless this was some sort of just straight out robbery, but do robbers really go around looking to rob women? There are purses who work at law firms, and especially considering that Cindy locks the door, it just seems like a really, really, really complex way to steal a purse, but maybe not. Spooky says, yeah, if you don't want to get caught, no body, no clues. I agree. I agree, Spooky, but this is something, I guess I don't talk about this enough in the episodes, and maybe not even enough on this live show. Something we always have to think about is why, if we're to think that it was a foul play, why did the killer make the body disappear? Let's just use an obvious example that everybody accepts, that there was a kidnapper, even though this disappearance is still unsolved. Jody Huisentruit. Why did somebody abduct her? Why didn't somebody just break into her apartment and do something there? Maybe too much noise. Maybe the person wasn't brave enough, but there are reasons. In addition, abducted from the parking lot. I guess the reason was that, well, if the motive was rape than murder, what are you going to do? Do that right in the parking lot at 4:30 in the morning? That seems like a bad choice. So we always have to think about in terms of, well, this disappearance is probably a murder, but then why isn't the body there? I don't talk about that enough. This is important. Rose says locking the door doesn't make any sense, Rose. The only thing that I would say is that we have to be very, very careful when we start using our common sense and logic to look at these things. Usually it's not overtly helpful because we run into so many scenarios that end up being true that are not logical at all. So you have to be very, very careful when we start thinking about things in terms of making sense. We just have too many examples of disappearances that really occurred that make no sense. Just to watch that. Yeah, I will. Rose, if I were someone she knew, then it definitely would make sense. Robert, this seems both planned and fantasy driven. It could be. I would say, in coming to kind of the conclusion of this, once again, I hope you will go out there and find the Unsolved Mysteries episode. Once again, it's free right there on YouTube, for the recreation and everything else, and maybe that'll put a lot of this more into focus. But, this disappearance has elements of Jody Huisentruit. It could have elements of a Julie Weflin, who certainly she was abducted too. So, If I could talk about Julie Weflin's disappearance, having just talked about Jody Huisentruit's as an example, with Julie Weflin's, it's once again the kind of the same thing. I think if you know about Julie Weflin's disappearance and you know what happened and you know the facts that are to be known, I think the most likely cause of her being abducted was rape and murder. Most likely. Once again, I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but I think, from an odds point of view, if we're going to Vegas to bet on these things, that's probably a really, really safe bet. The problem we have with Julie Weflin is then we have to go to the next step. Well, she was, behind this fence. It was kind of out in the middle of nowhere. Her truck was there. There's the building there, on and on and on. If somebody wanted to rape and murder her, why didn't they just do it right there? It would seem to be a pretty decent location for that. Once again, in contrast to Jody Huisentruit. So if somebody did show up there to rape and murder her, why didn't they just do it up there, right there? And if the motive was just straight out murder, why wasn't she strangled to death there? Why wasn't she shot there and her body left behind? Why did somebody take her body? Hard to say. But this is, this is one of those things that, I think I'm always I think this is why I find disappearances to be so more compelling than murders. There's just so much more to analyze and really, really, really get inside the motivations, not just of the missing people, because we do have so many cases that are featured where probably the missing person caused his or her own disappearance. But then we look at those ones that we think are foul play, but the body's missing, and we're thinking, why did that killer do that? So bringing this back to Cindy Anderson, it's kind of the same thing. If somebody did cause her disappearance, what exactly was the motivation, and why, if it was some sort of, rape, then murder, could that not have been done in the law firm behind the locked door? Was the person afraid that one of the lawyers would come in? Well, then this would mean that this person certainly had an idea of when the lawyer, these lawyers really did come to work, and didn't think it was going to be enough time to do whatever this guy wanted to do, on and on and on. But then we have a locked door, and like I said, it's a lot to think about. And then on top of everything else, there are no facts to rule out the idea that she just took off on her own. Whereas, we wouldn't think that if, somebody went in there and her purse and everything else were just strewn about the office and looked like there'd been some fight and a lamp was knocked over and a window was broken and the front door to the place was, wide open, and, there was, little droplets of blood and everything, kind of like we have with Julie Weflin, kind of like we have with Jody Huisentruit. So in some ways, Cindy's disappearance is like theirs, but in many ways it's not. So that is Cindy Anderson, Rockford. Once again, this seems both planned and fantasy-driven. It could be. The problem is it could also be both unplanned, and it was Cindy all by herself. And like I said, we're continuing to work on it. There's, the thing is, even though I've been, in my free time, which there isn't a lot, but I've gotten quite a bit done. And I have my ideas about this, but I would say the overall picture is still very murky. So unfortunately, that's all I can say, given the information that I've collected. And like I said, I've talked to a few people outside of her family, and they've given me really good information. And We'll continue to work on it. So that is the disappearance of Cindy Anderson. Like I said, it may eventually one day become an Unfound episode, but this is something that needs to be, I think fleshed out a lot more. Just like from some years ago, it was the year 2019 with Cameron Remmer, where I spent that whole year tracking down people who encountered him that night at the Fairmont Hotel. There was a beverage manager. There was a woman he encountered at some event or something like that. I even got to talk to the bellhop who had an interaction with him. As you also heard back then, that myself and my assistant Cherie were able to track down the two security guards on the job that night, and neither of them wanted to say anything. So I'll continue to work on it. Cranky says, I have a random question. That's what I'm looking for. Why, when you type in Google Addenso, it says that he's an actor? Were you an actor in a movie? I was an actor, Cranky. Yes, I was. I was an actor at Star Trek The Experience from 2000 to 2004. Was I in some movies? Yes, but they were independent ones produced by myself. But yes, I was a paid actor at Star Trek The Experience in Las Vegas from 2000 to 2004. Yeah. True story. I'm a jack of all trades. Cranky. Actor. What have I done? Car salesman for my family. Worked at 7-Eleven as a field consultant. Actor, model, stage manager for a Rat Pack show, stage manager for a magic show. I've done a lot of different things over the last 30 years. And yes, one of them is actor. That is true. So let's move on now. That's Cindy Anderson. Like I said, go check it out. Find the Unsolved Mysteries episode. And certainly in the comments for this live show tonight, I'd like to see some of your comments regarding your own analysis into her disappearance, which is still unsolved 44 years later. What do I want to talk about this next? I want to talk about the database. The database has been completed. Now, if you're like, well, what is the database? What the project has been, this has been going on for like a year and a half now. What I did was I created about 30 different parameters in which to classify disappearances. And many of these parameters are way different than what you'll find on NamUs. Of course, you go NamUs, you can search by race and by height and by weight and these things. Certainly, you can search by gender and ethnicity, race on the database. But when it comes to height and weight and tattoos and everything, that's not included. What I've created is a database based on the information I think is important. The categories I think are important to understanding disappearances. So there are categories like, well, how many hours did it take for the police report to be filed? If a disappearance was solved, well, then what then was the outcome of that disappearance? I, document, well, is the phone still missing? Is the ID missing? Do we have phone records? And I put that all together. I put all of these together that I thought were important. And I enlisted a listener, her name is Kathy, to go through all of Unfound's episodes, compiling that information. I know, crazy project. Crazy. So she had to listen to every episode And there were the categories that she had to be looking. And of course, some of these interviews that I did, it's not included. So those get like NAs or whatever, not available. And so she did the first 2/3 of Unfound's disappearances. I did the final third, in which I went back and also listened to those episodes, actually reading transcripts of them that were created through YouTube. And I marked down the answers to those categories and put it into an Excel spreadsheet. And then I shipped it off to a very, very good friend of mine in Florida. His name is Cameron. And he used a program called Looker Studio to create a searchable database based on this spreadsheet. So, and I've already posted a picture of it. You can see it in the discussion group on Facebook. It's a picture of it. And I've also already done a video where I explain all of the categories that are in the database. And because that needs to be done, because in using the database and just going into it without knowing anything, you might misunderstand some of the categories and why I made the categories the way I did. It's very, very important in using this database. Do you understand the criteria used to create it and why I came up with these different categories and the way I define them? All right. Very, very important. And what's been the final thing that finally, and Cameron put this together, and there's just needed to be some tweaking. Some of the categories were not working correctly. I wanted to take some of the other categories out and include some different things in it and being able to search. And then the final problem was the dates were just, I wanted to be able to, of course, have people search between particular dates. So any disappearances that happened during the 1990s. You couldn't do that. It just wouldn't work. Cameron finally figured it out, and now it does work. So if you want to do a disappearance of any of Unfound's disappearances that occurred, let's just say you want to do a search for any Unfound disappearance of anybody between the ages of 25 and 40 who went missing during the 1990s, who had a drug addiction, who was last seen by a boyfriend or something. You can do that. Now, I'm not saying anything's going to come up, but that's the kind of in-depth search you can do to see if any of Unfound's disappearances match any criteria that you can come up with by checking off the boxes in this database. And I'm telling you, it's fascinating. Of course, last month in November, if you watched my the show I did with Dr. T, I appeared on her show and I talked about it, and just some of the numbers that have come up already, it's pretty fascinating. For example, I could have never guessed that out of 390 disappearances featured, only 11% of the people have college degrees. That's it. I don't think that I knew that at all. Of course, there are other, criteria that maybe stick out more in my mind. But the college education, and marking it off, do any searches for people with college degrees, and you find out that there were a very few. I don't know if I could, I guess, I don't know. It was just very surprising to me. It was a very stark contrast, like I said, compared to them and the people who don't have any education or even just people who graduated high school. You can do a comparison. You can do a search for all the people who just graduated from high school, and then you can do a search for all the people who graduated from college. And then you can kind of compare that to the general population, and you can get an idea of, well, if I just graduate from high school, does that make it less likely or more likely that I'm going to go missing? If I go to college and graduate, does it make it less likely or more likely that I'm going to go missing? Of course, we're finding out it makes it much, 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 much less likely. Interesting. And you can combine that with any of the other categories in the database. And of course, the database will continue to grow because Unfound continues to do more disappearances. So the database is done. It's not totally public yet. I actually have people on Patreon I've sent the link to, and they can mess around with it for a while. When I get back to Florida, before the week is over, I will surely do a video on how to use the database because, like I said, you have to combine the definitions and the categories with actually going to this link and, checking things off. And it's, I suppose if you wanted to, put some work into it, some hours, you can really get the finer points of it. I think it'll just be easier if I do a video on it and you can watch the video, and kind of when you go into it, you kind of already have a feel for what's going on. We'll see where it goes. I can tell you I'm going to be spending a lot of time on that once I get back to Florida, doing different kinds of searches. And what we're trying to find are tendencies. We're trying to find correlations and causations between certain criteria and people going missing. MT says the database is amazing. Great work by everyone involved. Yes, MT, I got your message. Thank you for posting something there on Patreon. So there you have it. MT is somebody who has already been messing around with the database, going in, clicking off categories, and of course MT is saying that it's amazing to be able to do that, because I can tell you nobody else has done that. Nothing against John Lorden or Marissa over at The Vanished or other people who cover disappearances. None of them have done that. Not a criticism. I'm just a geek like that. But as you already know, when it comes to disappearances, I take it a lot further than anybody else. When it comes to really looking at this, really trying to understand them, scientifically trying to understand them, I surely do that more than anybody else. I guess it's just me. So I want you all to be a part of the process, and that's why the database will eventually be public, in which anybody can use it. And you can look through all of Unfound's disappearances and find out exactly who's going missing, why they're going missing, and all of the criteria surrounding all of it. So there you go. True crime, and so let's move on to this. True crime events. And it does look like I'm going to have enough information to get to the end of the 2 hours tonight. Imagine that. It helped that the Cindy Anderson coverage was so long. Let's see. Rockford says, speaking of Lorden, he just did an episode of Regina Boss, yes, and mentioned your great work throughout. Yeah, actually, I was told about that. Thank you also, though, Rockford, for letting me know. Yeah. Regina Marie Boss, of course, in the Unfound database. And still a few possibilities, I think, for her disappearance. But thank you for letting me know, Rockford. MTS is very unique. I think it's very easy to use, but I'm kind of an Excel nerd. Spooky says database sounds so cool. You'll get to see it soon, Spooky. The Cake, what is your hope for people who implement this information? Great idea, by the way. My hope is that anybody that goes on there will start to get it will hone all of our ideas about who is going missing, how long is it exactly taking for reports to be done, who are the actual people who are last seeing these people, and whatever category you select, how solvable is that disappearance? What kind of disappearances are actually getting solved? Which ones are staying unsolved? And if you get inside how long it took to report the missing person or their addiction or whatever else, can you start to draw some conclusions on how we might go about actually solving these disappearances? Because once you can do that, when you can narrow down to the specifics of a disappearance, you can then start to compare this unsolved disappearance to a lot of solved disappearances out there that seem similar. Well, how did those solved ones get to be solved? And can any of that be used to solve this one? That's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to do. And I also think that given the disappearances, I will continue to insist, are so much more complex than murders. And I continue to believe that disappearances are greatly, greatly, greatly misunderstood. And I think that even in, I by the way, I've not finished this book about disappearances, missing persons from the UK yet. But it's clear to me, even these people who are writing these very scientific, like textbooks and everything, they're not getting into it deep enough either. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm not saying they're lying in that book or any, but I don't know how you go about using that information in real world scenarios. There could be a problem that we have to remember who's going to be using this information. This is one of the things in reading this missing persons book that, like I said, from the UK that I've not finished yet. One of the problems is that maybe it's just a little too pointy-headed. Maybe this all needs to be put in a form that, no offense to the average police officer out there, but the average police officer can understand, that the average investigator can understand. What I also don't like about this particular book, once again, I'm not saying the work they necessarily did is bad, but you need more real world examples for these disappearances. In addition, the book doesn't say anything about disappearances that are thought to be murders. It mostly talks about children. It talks about, of course, it talks about trafficking and everything. Well, most disappearances are not that. Most disappearances are what? Walk-offs. Most disappearances are husbands making their wives disappear. Well, how do you specifically go about solving those types of cases? It doesn't say anything. Maybe this database will be able to do that. I think it depends on the details if they can be compared to other cases or not. Well, it does. Rose, I'm not going to say, every disappearance is a bit unique. Absolutely. But I would say we have to start somewhere. Because I can assure you, that's not being done. It's no different, being that we're in the NFL season and, teams are now jockeying for position and playoff pictures getting clearer. What do teams do? I'm playing the Pittsburgh Steelers this week. Well, a few weeks ago, Buffalo blew them out. Well, what did Buffalo do to the Steelers that got them to win? Can we do the same thing? It's just nothing. It's nothing but that. And I realize that it's a different team. Like it's going to be the Miami Dolphins. I realize the Miami Dolphins are a different team than the Buffalo Bills. But still, the Miami Dolphins can maybe learn something from what the Buffalo Bills did, so the Miami Dolphins can win too. This is the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Just that we're talking about disappearances instead of football. But thank you, Rose. Thank you for that. So getting back to true crime events, being that I've not talked about in this for a while. And I know that some of you do take an interest in Crime Con and, these other things that go on. And you may be wondering, why doesn't Ed talk about this? Why doesn't Ed talk about going to any of these? Why is it that Ed doesn't go to any of these? Why is it that Ed shows up on college campuses, although I've not been to one recently? Why is it that Ed has showed up multiple times on, um, at schools to speak to criminal justice students? Obviously, he can drive. Obviously, he has no problem speaking in public. Obviously. Then why is it that he's been doing this for 9 years and has never gone to CrimeCon or any other true crime events? Well, the reason is this. I don't see myself and the work I do as being relevant to what they're doing there. And I know that sounds crazy. Okay. I know that sounds crazy. Because I see myself as, even though I'm a reporter, and I'm interviewing people, I'm just a reporter. I ask questions. But I see myself much more of an educator, as a teacher, as a professor, as an instructor, whatever adjective you want or synonym you want to use, than I think anybody else does. And those venues are not made for education. They are made more for, discussions. You have these, panels and things like that. And I'm just going to be honest, I don't do panels. I know that sounds arrogant as hell, but I don't do panels. I don't, of course, I appear on Dr. Telesco's show. I, of course, appeared on Heather Grotman's podcast, loved it. I did a collaboration with John Lorden a few years ago, of course, with Jason Landry. But because I prefer to go about my disappearance work in a particular way that I know other people don't, I just have a problem being on a panel with them. I just am. If I were to be put on a, in addition to the fact that that's all about entertainment and it's not about education, CrimeCon and these events, they're all run by entertainment companies. And the second those kinds of things don't make any money, they won't do it anymore. Even though the disappearances and all these problems still exist. So there's that too. I just think that me getting up on a panel that would be about disappearances, and whoever else would be on a panel, I just have so much more to say. I have so much more to offer. I've actually thought about these things scientifically. Not, I don't look at these disappearances from a, man, this one's so just so interesting. I use the word because it's an English word, but I don't think I ever mean it the way other people do. And all of this, I just would feel very uncomfortable doing that. Because I just think that I would always be in opposition probably to a lot of other people are going to say. We're going to get into disappearances and they're going to be talking about dogs. And they're going to be talking about theories. And they're going to be talking about all these things, lie detector tests and everything. And I'm just going to have to reject all of it. I don't find, even though I ask guests about it, but I'm just going to say all of that is crap. Well, who wants to be on a panel with a guy like myself who, as soon as they bring up, what do you think about handlers? And everybody else is going to be, well, they did this. And I'm going to say, well, it's all crap. I got to be me. So in addition to the fact is that there's just too much hero worship that goes on. I think that too many of the people who go to them, you know, just like getting their pictures taken a little too much. You know, you see they get pictures with Nancy Grace and all of these things, and it's just not what I see as my role in any of this. Okay. It's just the way it is. I just think that there are too many people who go there as you the audience, who just want to meet hosts and take pictures with hosts and get their autographs and everything. And that's just not me. You know, getting my autograph and everything else. I just, it's very much like if like, of course he's dead now. If knew Neil Peart, the drummer from Rush, he was also of course, he was a rock star, and he was that way as well. That he could get up on stage, he could play the drums, fantastic music. I'm not the biggest Rush fan, but I can recognize it's fantastic music. But he wasn't so much into the social side of being a musician. And, meeting people and taking pictures with people and, signing autographs and all these things that, performers are expected to do. He just wasn't into it. He was, not that he was arrogant or anything. There was just maybe a part of his personality that was uncomfortable with it. And that's kind of where the song Limelight from Rush, that's what, he wrote the lyrics to that song, Living in the Limelight, and about how it's very uncomfortable and all of that. But he has a job to do. He likes to be a drummer. He's making fantastic music. And so I'm kind of the same way. I don't mind meeting people, but to actually go to some place like that and, all of it put together does not just go very well with my personality, and it doesn't go along very well with my attitude toward the work I do. Whereas obviously even people who I deeply respect, like Julia Cowley, she goes to CrimeCon. Fine. It's just not what I do. Serenity. I know I just joined the conversation, but somebody on Reddit compiled a database of all people who disappeared with their vehicles. Could be done. What we have to understand is there are not that many of them. The Unfound database will tell you that cars going missing with people is only 4% of all disappearances total. Still matters. Still horrible. I'm glad there's scuba divers out there trying to find, these cars and the people that are probably in them. But we have to understand there are really not that many of them compared to the whole. And I would just wonder, when it comes to just is it a database or is it just a list? Is it a searchable list? Is it searchable with categories, or it's simply just a spreadsheet with names? These are all the people who disappeared with cars. Is there criteria? Do we have the kind of cars? Do they have information on where each of these disappearances where these people were going? Do they have any information? Is there any belief that the person could be drinking and driving? Searchable with the map. Okay. Maybe you can send me a link to it at Serenity Unfound Podcast at gmail.com. I'll check it out just to see. Thank you for telling me about it. Rockford, I don't see the upside for the attendee either. It's not like big time podcast guys going to take the time to get in the weeds with me on Jason Jokowski or whatever, why else would I go? Yeah. Like I said, I know I'm a lone wolf out here. you know, but that's it's the way my personality is. It's always been that way. There's a reason I'm still single at 55. I'm a good guy. I want you all know I'm a nice guy. I'm a friendly guy, social guy. And all of you know, anytime you've ever emailed me or contacted me, messenger or email, I get back to you. I'm happy to talk to you and everything. But in those venues, it's just going to get weird real fast. And it very well could be also because once again, not to sound arrogant, I just think I know more than other people about these disappearances. And so I'm going to be on a panel and, the issue is I'm not going to dumb myself down to be in front of these people and to appear with these people. I'm not doing that. So that's what makes this all very prickly. And on top of that, I'm not one to want to make waves or anything. I'm not going to go there. I would never go somewhere to show people up or anything like that. That's not me either. And enjoy it, and that's not me either. So they can do what they do. I'll just continue to do what I do. And the reason this even came up is because a fellow host who I respect, who also though goes to CrimeCon, has let me know that there are some people out there trying to put an event together, and asked me if I would want to take part. And I love it. That even somebody would think of me, I appreciate it. That even I pop into somebody's mind, I deeply appreciate it. I like it. But in responding to this person, I was like, well, it all depends. It just depends. So if anything comes of that, I'll let you know. We'll just have to see. But where are we? 57. All right, so we're about done. Anything else? I'm leaving, going back to Florida tomorrow. I don't know what I'm going to be listening to the whole week, driving back 16 some hours. Haven't figured that out yet. I'm guessing that I'm going to have at least one Steve Pankey letter when I get back, because I did write him before I came up here. So I'm guessing we might have a Steve Pankey letter. I don't know what the topic will be. I don't know what he's writing back to me. But maybe that will be happening. Of course, I had my mail stopped for a time. So we'll see. I don't know if there's any true crime stuff that I need to listen to. I don't know. But it's a long drive, probably music. On the way up here, I listened to a part of Fahrenheit 451. I listened to some soccer podcast. There'll probably be some new episodes about the United States men's team that I may want to listen to. A lot of things, between Spotify and all these subscriptions that I have to everything, Amazon Prime, I could have James Bond playing. Who knows, what else I could be doing. So that's about it. As far as this Friday goes, I think, no offense, D, but I may have to do an interview on Thursday evening. Even so, I can't guarantee that that's then going to turn into a Friday episode. I just don't know yet. Certainly, these people are going to be interviewed. It's going to probably be two people together. Excited about doing it. I think they're reliable, and everything else. They're very motivated to be interviewed and get this disappearance out there. I just don't know about the turnaround between Thursday and Friday and everything. And as I can, up here seeing my dad, I'm not saying I don't get work done. I do. I'm just not quite as efficient. I can't work quite quickly with as much time and everything. So, everything gets backed up at least a little bit. We'll just have to see. So I'm making no promises for this Friday. We'll just have to see. Will it be anything on Friday? Once again, I don't know. I'll assess everything on Wednesday and try to make a prediction on what's going to happen with Friday. Continue to talk to people, but it's going to be hard putting an episode together this week. But D, I will let you know about Thursday evening. As you would guess, the interviews take precedence over anything I do in my life. So don't take it personally, D. Thank you for distracting me from my impending dentist appointment. If it helps you, Cake, a few years ago, I spent so much time in a dentist chair, you wouldn't even believe it. I don't even get into how much. I don't have any dental insurance. You don't even want to know how much money I spent on my teeth. And I'm not a dentist fan either, but it's amazing how much I got used going there, and it wasn't fearful at all. You know what, the Cake, I think everything's going to come out fine. I don't even know whether it's a root canal, getting wisdom teeth pulled, whatever. I bet you're going to be fine. I have complete confidence the dentist is going to get it done, although it may be very expensive. So that's all I got for you tonight. Thank you all for listening and watching and everything. Thank you for making the time. When we all get back together, I will be back in Florida. And maybe we'll see if the Book of Souls album gets you through the Carolina, the Book of Souls. I've been listening to that album. I've listened to a few songs on it, but not the entire album in a while, Rockford. Thank you for bringing that up. So thank you, Charlie. Say hi to your sons for me. And everybody, keep your heads on swivels out there. Do not end up on my podcast. Thank you, Rose. Good night.